Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today is June 24th, and we have a little bit of a variety day today. We need to figure out what's wrong with the Backhoe's transmission, and we need to start cleaning off our equipment to put it away for the end of the season. We're going to dive right into it, pull the Backhoe out, and figure out what's wrong with it, because we have no idea. It's a pretty good sign that the Backhoe even moved. The leak wasn't as bad as I initially thought. A little bit of oil on concrete looks like a lot more than it is. And as you can see, the pan right here doesn't have that much in it. We put it in maybe 12 or 13 hours ago. No, that's not right at all. It's 8:40. So we probably put it in 18 or 19 hours ago, yesterday afternoon. And it didn't really catch that much oil. So it's either slowing down, out of oil, or the problem is resolving itself. Maybe a bad seal, something of that nature. I climbed under it yesterday and really couldn't locate exactly where the leak was coming from. Get our portable shop floor. Yeah, it's coming from higher up.
Well, that's water.
Yeah, that's water. And consulting the Holy Book of Knowledge, looking for transmission fluid. We pulled the stick and there was nothing on it, so it's not a good sign. We're probably gonna have to take it to town, but it's just a matter of whether or not, if we add transmission fluid, that'll make it to town. Let's say what kind of oil to use. We couldn't find the exact specifications of the oil to use on the transmission, so when in doubt, you go with the John Deere High Guard. Hopefully putting John Deere oil in case equipment doesn't cause some kind of antibody-like reaction. Blow the whole thing up. We put over a gallon of oil in it. We're gonna try and take it into town. Maybe a 20-mile drive, so close to 45 minutes, 50 minutes on the road with this Backhoe. It's kind of slow. It makes sense that this stopped leaking in the barn because it didn't have any oil left, so maybe we underestimated the severity of the problem. Who knows? We made it to Berkey's, but just barely. Transmission was running warm the whole trip. I honestly thought we were gonna have to pull over a few times, but we made it here, no problems. It's Berkey's problem to solve now, not ours. Although it may be an expensive one by the time it's all said and done. I'm not an expert though. The next thing on my agenda was to start cleaning up our spring equipment. I was making preparations to kind of get the ball rolling on that, but I think Mother Nature may have a different plan in store for us, which will probably stop me from doing any kind of that work this afternoon, and maybe for the next few days. If you can't tell, there's a pretty strong rain coming across the countryside from the west, and it looks relatively heavy. Well, that's a torrential downpour coming. Oh, there's some good news. 4-leaf clover. The short-term forecast over the next week is calling from anywhere from 4 to 6, maybe even 8 inches of rain here, which really would not be good, especially if it all came in a very close proximity. However, that's not what they're forecasting. It's going to be spread out. We could take 1 inch a day at this point and not really be overwhelmed with water. Now, if we got 4 or 5 inches at once, that would not be good for our crop. We need to seek shelter. The rain is upon us. Don't you hate when you get rained out from doing something that you didn't want to do in the first place? Just terrible. It's coming down pretty good now. I'd say this is a drought buster, but we don't have a drought here. Our crop looks pretty good. This is what you call a toad strangler. Really coming down here. At least there's not any wind. Just found this in the road. This is a sleeve for the inside of a hitch to downsize it. So these heavy duty pickups come with a larger receiver to fit a very heavy hitch, but a lot of hitches you find around are smaller, so you have to insert the sleeve. I would imagine whoever lost it out here in the road is probably gonna miss it, but I mean, I didn't really want to just leave it. Well, unfortunately everyone, the rain did not stop. I'm actually tuning into you right now a little bit over 48 hours since we last talked. That was on Friday afternoon. We started to have some very heavy rains. And right now it is close to 11 p.m. on Sunday night, pretty close to Monday, which it's starting to feel kind of like a Monday based on what just happened. To get you guys up to speed really quick, since Friday, we've had 6 to 7 inches of rain, which is no laughing matter. And for you European metric crazy folk, roughly 150 to 175 millimeters. That's a lot of rain. I'm sure you're probably thinking that I was at a water park right now. No, that's actually just the water draining off of our fields because we just got 3 inches to put us up to that 6 to 7 inch mark in the last hour. Behind me, you can see that there's actually more storms off in the distance. That's to the west. Storms usually run west to east here. And we're looking at chances of rain pretty much tonight, tomorrow, the next day, the next 4 days. feels kind of tropical, like we're in Florida or something here, getting these very sporadic, high humidity, high temperature rainfalls. Like I explained to you earlier on in the season, we can take a pretty big rain at one time, but when we get multiple big rains layered on top of each other, that's when we really start to get into problem territory. And that's what we're looking at right now, especially with the forecast we have. Right here, we are about 3/4 of a mile south of our main farmstead where we keep all of our farm equipment. This is about 500 acres worth of watershed coming off here to this road, crossing over into the gravel pit, a large pond over there. And there's no shortage of moisture here, folks. Thousands and thousands of gallons per minute leaving this farm from all of the rain we just had. We hopped over about 5 miles to the east of where we just were for one last quick stop. I just want to kind of give you guys an idea of how much water we have directly after a rainfall like this. I don't normally get the opportunity to be out here directly after it happens just because it's usually in the middle of the night. This one fell in the evening, so I can get out here and kind of show you what we're dealing with. The farm we're at right now has been affectionately named by some people as Lake Dole. You can't really see how much of a lake it is because one, it's dark, and two, the corn out here is 5 feet tall. Right here underneath this very large grate is the heart of our tile drainage system for our entire farm here. Drains a couple hundred acres of good dark ground and then some rolling terrace ground. So there's a lot of different tile patterns and systems out here draining in a lot of varieties of ways. The main drain here though is a 24-inch tile. It runs about 1,500 feet to the east, draining into a larger drainage ditch. And this is what we're working with right now. Not much is drained. And I can tell you, if you can only see a foot of the top of this, there's probably 60 acres right now that has at least a foot tall water in it. And it's gonna be a while before it drains. One, because there's a lot of water, and two, the drainage ditch over there can only run so fast, and this won't even start draining until that gets to a certain point. It is evident there though that there is water moving. However, I don't think the water is moving out. What I think is happening is the water from higher up has enough head pressure that it's actually pushing out here because multiple tiles feed in and they open up into the concrete area down below and then drain into another tile. They're not connected, it's open. So we're having head pressure pushing the water out back onto this farm. I can guarantee you that we'll be checking in on this tomorrow, and I doubt that we'll see much difference. Hopefully we don't get any more rain. Look at all this water running in downtown Mattoon. We're in a residential area here. Cars have been flooded out. The water's just racing down the roads here. Oh my gosh, this is insane. Holy cow. This has got to be 1.5 feet, 2 foot deep. It's been a little bit over 8 hours. We're back at the cornfield that we stopped at last night, the last one, and it's still quite a bit underwater. If anything, it actually has not started draining at all or very marginally. I would assume once we left it was still backfilling from all of the head pressure up on the terraces, and all this around floods into this pond. And right now it's probably just starting to drain. I don't have an exact number to put on it, but we do have a little bit of a grace period per se before this water starts to negatively impact our crop. We have clear skies today, an abundance of sunshine, and the high is 85 degrees. So it will not take long for our plants to really start to see yield loss. It's hard to see, but it is draining. There's a little bit of swirling down there, which indicates that the water is getting suctioned through out to the drainage ditch. There's a lot of water out here. And this is just what you can see. Imagine what's out in the field. They make drought guard corn. I wonder when they're gonna get flood guard corn. Besides all of the added stress on our plants and root systems out here in the field, this massive amount of moisture has actually created another predicament here for us on this farm, specifically in our soybean fields. We are approaching the time where we have to make a very crucial management decision, and that is whether or not we're going to spray fungicide on our beans. In our neck of the woods, applying fungicide on our soybeans is a no-brainer. I've seen multiple of you comment on my videos before saying fungicide doesn't pay here, it doesn't pay where we farm, we've never seen it work, and I'm not going to disagree that it doesn't work for you. However, every single year for us and pretty much all the farmers around us, if you don't spray fungicide, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. Easily an 8+ bushel advantage applying a product versus not. For those of you who are unacquainted with fungicides, I'm not going to go into detail in this video. I will later on. Fungicide simply is a product that kills and prevents fungus from infecting our plants. Fungi being one of the largest yield robbers out here in our field. The issue that all of this excessive rainfall creates for our fungicide application is that we have a relatively narrow time frame to apply the fungicide at the optimal time. If we're too early or too late, we will still get a little bit of a yield advantage, but we may be leaving a bushel, 2 bushel, even 3 bushels on the table versus applying it at the perfect time. On what I would call an average growing season, the fungicide application usually takes place the 1st to 2nd week of July. Well, this is no normal growing season. We had a lot of these beans planted the 1st week of April. Specifically, our shorter season beans are going to be reaching the stage of maturity where you want to be applying fungicide. And we like to use a ground rig to get out here and apply it. It's cheaper. You get more carrier volume to apply your fungicide and insecticide to the field. With 6 to 7 inches of rain, though, over the last 3 days, you're not quite going to be able to get a ground rig across that nice mushy ground. So what we're looking at specifically in this field is, are the soybeans where the fungicide needs to be applied? And if so, how much time do we have to apply it? If it looks like we've hit that starting point where we need to be applying, we're going to have to summon up an airplane out here and apply it to these fields. We don't have this concern with the majority of our beans. However, our earliest planted and shortest season soybeans are the farthest along in their life cycle, and they've reached that point where we need to apply. I don't have any particular issue in using an airplane other than the fact that sometimes it's 2 or 3 times more expensive than a ground rig. The goal out here is efficiency. We want to get the most return on our investment with spending the least amount of money. Bringing an airplane out is going to be inherently more expensive. It'll do the same job. Most people argue that maybe it's not quite as good of a sprayer in terms of coverage, but at the end of the day, you're splitting hairs when you make that kind of argument. Regardless of all of that, if we do need a plane out here, sometimes there's a 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5-day lead time to get them in the area and get your product applied. So we're scouting right now to try and decide what we need to do. Let's take a look at a few of these soybean plants. I'm really not a fan of how humid it is out here. Not only is it uncomfortable for me, but feels like it's gonna rain, kind of tropical like I mentioned last night. Very humid, hot weather creates storms very quickly. They weren't calling for 3 inches of rain, but that's what we got. There's a chance of storms from 4 to 7 p.m. today, and hopefully we don't get another 3-incher because that would be very devastating for our yields. Here are 2 of the plants I pulled from the field. These are both Pioneer 31 A95 Extend soybeans. The first thing I noticed about this and a lot of our soybeans is they're actually really short, especially compared to other years. I don't know what you would attribute this to other than the colder weather and the early planting. However, one good thing I've noticed is that although they're short, the nodes are packed very tightly together. So I think that we're actually still looking at a very good crop. Soybean height can be very misleading. I've seen very, very tall beans do poorly, and I've seen very short beans do very well. Now that's not to say that these are going to be excellent, but I still think our yield potential is pretty high, other than the fact that they're sitting with wet feet right now. Let's talk about the growth stage of these soybeans. Last time we checked in on this field was right after the frost we had, probably over 2 months ago. Hard to believe now that that ever happened. But we were still talking about V1, V2, V3, those vegetative growth stages. Well, now we are past the vegetative chart and we are on reproductive. The first stage of reproductive is any sign, oh, it's a bee attacking me. Leave me alone, bee. Stop, bee, stop. Stop. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. The first stage of reproductive growth is R1. R1 is the development of any bloom on the plant. Well, these soybeans have been blooming for a long time. These happen to have a purplish, pinkish inflorescence. Other beans have white. One variety, though, is only going to have one type of flower color. Really kind of irrelevant information, but a fun fact. Anyways, R1 is the first bloom developing. R2, which is full bloom development, is when you start to have blooms on the top 2 nodes of your plant. As you can see here, these top trifoliates, we do have blooms coming out, so we have been in R2 for probably quite a while. Most agronomists would say that R2 is a pretty long stage of reproductive growth. Now, the stage we are looking for our soybean fungicide application is R3. R3 is the next step in growth and is actually based on pod development. You can see this plant has some pods developing at the bottom, but that's not exactly what we base this on. The plant reaches R3 when the 4th node down has a pod that is 5/16 of an inch. So we'll look at this soybean plant right now. The farthest up developed node is right here. So there's 1 node, 2 node, 3 node, 4 node. As you can see here on this 4th node, We are actually approaching R3 very closely. These right here are pods developing. Here's a pod that actually could form, or the flower may just abort. Soybeans do abort 70 or 75% of their flowers, so there is a lot of yield potential out here that breeders have just not figured out how to capture. This pod right here is getting close to 5/16 of an inch. I don't have a ruler, but I would peg it as there, if not a little bit bigger. That essentially means that we're flirting with the line of R2 to R3 on this plant. Now let's look at this other one. All the plants out in the field are kind of different stages. They didn't emerge evenly due to the cold temperatures. Not a big deal, but it does affect your fungicide application. Here we'll start at the first node, is this small little guy here. So we have one, second one is very close behind, 2, 3, 4. So there's our fourth node. We have some flowers developing on there, maybe some aborted, but I don't see any pods started yet. However, if you take one step down to the fifth node, we have a lot of pods developing. What that tells me is it won't be long before this will be an R3 as well. You look farther down the plant, pods all up and down it. This one, same thing, pods all up and down it. Some of them even actually filled out pretty well in terms of size potential. They're not filled with grain yet, they're just soft little pods. This information may seem somewhat unnecessary, but it has very large financial implications. I believe Pioneer's data shows that 83% of the time, fungicide applied at the R3 stage is the most economically beneficial. If you get to R4, which will happen probably 10 to 14 days after R3 hits, you may lose at least 1 bushel an acre yield. 1 bushel an acre on an 80-acre field at $12 beans is quite a bit of a money. You're looking at over $1,000 on this field total, let alone the rest of your farm. So those implications are rather large when you consider it financially. What I'm seeing on these plants is that we're just on the cusp of R3, which I think will give us a week, maybe 10 days before we actually really have to get the fungicide applied. That gives us a little bit more room for error. The question is, we had 6 inches of rain. Will this ground be dry enough in a week to 10 days to get out across here with a ground rig, or do we need to summon the airplane? The issue with the airplane is we may need to schedule it today to get them next week. Whereas if we schedule them next week, we might not get them till our plants are at R4, and then, you know, we lose money on that deal. I've explained our rationale for planting soybeans earlier numerous times. They grow based on photoperiods, so the length of day determines when their reproductive cycle starts. That means that the earlier you get them in the ground and growing, the more vegetative growth they can get on before they start their reproductive life. Well, that seems counterintuitive because you would think, okay, well, regardless, they're all going to get the same amount of vegetative growth if they mature on the solstice, or let's just say a random day they start reproductive growth. What you don't realize, though, is most modern soybean varieties are indeterminate. Indeterminate means that they will still continue vegetative growth, putting on trifoliates and more blooms and then pods as they go through their reproductive cycle. So it's very common to see pods starting to develop at the bottom of the plant where we still have undeveloped trifoliates at the top of the plant. And these will continue to stack up and up and up and essentially just multiply up the plant, as well as our side branches here will do the same thing. And we will keep maturing from the bottom to the top of the plant, hopefully adding more nodes, more pods, and increasing our yield. The earlier we plant them, the more growth we get, the more reproductive potential we have, the more overall yield potential that is out in the field. One other important consideration about this fungicide application, the rule of thumb is you want at least 50% of your field to be at R3 before you apply it. You'd rather be too early than too late. That's why if 50% of the field is at R3, you go ahead and spray it. Without even walking to the south end of the farm, which is the darkest area of the field, probably has the most growth, I would say easily 50% of the field is at R3 or almost there. So we're starting to flirt with the danger zone. We may have to go out here and get a sprayer, but we might kind of sit and stew on it for a while to decide. I know I talked kind of fast right there, but it would have taken me a rather long amount of time to explain that if I didn't pick up the pace a little bit. Our neighbors across the road have some wheat that looks like it's pretty close to ready to cut. Not really a wheat expert at all. For everything I know about corn and soybeans, I know equally as little about wheat. Looks good though. Is that good wheat? Someone tell me. Sure is pretty. Look at that, I'm a wheat farmer now. Got my straw in my mouth. Based on what I've heard from other people, I think a very good wheat crop in this area is probably 100 bushels per acre. If you do a phenomenal job, I think you could probably get over that, maybe 110. There's also plenty of time and no shortage of moisture right now to get your double crop beans in. If they get the right rains as the soybeans get into reproductive growth out there, it's not unheard of them to get 50 to 60 bushel beans. Now that would be a phenomenal year, but 100 bushel wheat and 50 bushel beans, pretty good cash return there. It's rather nice getting the rain after the corn's 5-6 foot tall because you just can't see how much water is actually out there. The corn's got the rows closed, can't see in. Hasn't gone down much though. We have the advantage of the added height, so that buys us some time. We also lose time because it's pretty warm and sunny out. 85 degrees. I hope it starts drying soon because we will be losing some yield here. And it does appear that there are storms starting to pop up. That looks like maybe 20 miles to the northwest of us. If there's rain popping up out there though, it's just a matter of time before it's popping out to the west and heading right back over us. We are finally at the point in the season when we put away the corn planter and the field cultivators, which of course we have to disassemble the corn planter first, take the plates out so they don't warp over the winter, pull out those delivery brushes and untension them so they last a little bit longer, and so the mice don't get them and use them to make a nest. You only want to have to replace those. They're about $200 a pop. Plates are all out. All 24 of our corn seed singulation plates in here. Put those away for the winter. Our fear is that the freeze and thaws, change in temperature, will cause these plates to warp a little bit. We want them to be as accurate as possible, so we remove them. Get the last of the corn out of here. I know what you're probably thinking. What if we have to replant some of that corn that's drowned out? Well, at this point in the year, it's almost July, we're not going to be replanting any corn. If we go back out there, we'll use the soybean planter. We just can't get it to mature fast enough to make it worth our while to plant any corn. Soybeans, I mean, we won't get a full yield if we replant, but we can salvage a little bit of our acreage and make somewhat of a return, versus corn where probably wouldn't amount to much by the time it's all said and done. The last step of disassembly is to remove the brushes right here. These are what allow it to deliver to the ground accurately. We've been told that the mice like to use them to make nests. So one, we want to avoid that. And two, we want to remove the tension from the belt because they're sprung pretty tight. That way they'll last longer. Got it pulled up to the wash bay. Brand new. Just put it in 150 years ago. Got about 4 rows out of 24 washed off on that planter. And I'm getting called over to help back in one of the field cultivators. I don't know if I'd call it a much needed break because it was actually pretty nice being in that power washer. And no, most of this is not water, it's sweat. I better run if I'm gonna help him before he runs into something. Oh! 6 more inches, he said. It'll help us fit that much more equipment in the barn. We're finally to the part I was dreading. We backed the other field cultivator in here and we like to get it very close, not waste much space, which if you consider the tongue, it doesn't have much volume in terms of metal, but it takes up a lot of space. So what I have to do is crank the tongue up really far. That way we can back the other field cultivator a lot farther under. So as opposed to being stopped right here with the other field cultivator, we might be able to get up to here. So 2 more feet allows us to get a whole nother implement ahead of it. Not looking forward to it though, because 1, it's hot, and 2, it's kind of tiresome work. Oh, based on the resistance, I would say that we're getting close to the end of the line here. Got it cranked so far up I can't even secure it with the collar. Looks nice and lifted to me. Maybe gain is 3 foot. It won't be much longer, maybe month and a half. We'll be getting the big 13-inch bin loading augers out, getting the grain cart out, and then getting that combine out. Here comes number 2. I did awfully close here. We may come back and there'll be a baby field cultivator here. Moving equipment around is like farming charades. Just kind of got to guess what you're supposed to do based on the hand movements. All right, that was enough horsing around. Back to my day job. Cornhead still looks sweet though. It only took about an hour and a half. I just finished up washing it off. The only thing that we don't really give a thorough washing to are the actual motors in the units themselves. We do all the hardware per se, the no-till coulters, the true V openers, the gauge wheels, the closing wheels, but we don't like to get that high pressure water near any of the computerized systems. It's not necessarily good preventive maintenance if you cause more problems. So we got the problem areas, we're gonna put it away. Everything's unhooked. All we have left to do is put the soybean planter back in and the vertical till. They're not getting unhooked or cleaned off just quite yet. They're kind of our flexible tools. The soybean planter may be in action here soon if we lose a lot of crops from this large amount of rainfall. Give me that AC, baby. Whew, it's warm. You know you put in a pretty good day's worth of work when you can't wear the same pants again tomorrow. Much like a majority of our ground, I'm a little bit moist from all this water, and it's not looking promising because out there to the west, I don't know if you can pick this up on the camera, looking kind of blue, a little hazy. I'd say we're drumming up a storm over there and the wind is blowing to the northeast. So it'll be headed right at us. Hopefully we don't get anything. If we do, it's very minimal. We are by no means even close to having our first ponds drained, so if we get another big rain on top of that, that would be very, very devastating for our crop. In the northwestern side of the Corn Belt, they'd probably be tickled to death if they saw that headed their direction, whereas us, I would happily send it over there for them to help their crop out that's desperately in need of a rain, whereas we've got enough rain at this point, I think, to last us through July. The old timers would say, though, never turn down a rain in June. Well, I probably would turn this one down. Statistically, I don't think it's gonna hurt us too much. I figured it'd be kind of rude of me to end this video without giving you any further updates on all the water we've had. I'm standing down here south of Mattoon where we have a very large ponding farm. We've got this big tile system draining it, and it has gone down maybe 3 or 4 inches, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 3 or 4 inches could be a couple 100,000 gallons of water. If we miss these pop-up storms, which I'm very optimistic that we will, or we just get a very minimal amount of water, this should be drained within 36 to 48 hours. One last thing I want to update you on before I end the video is a crop report on our corn. Now our corn crop looks very good. Obviously it's under some stress right now, but something very significant is happening. This corn right now is showing the signs of tasseling. Tasseling, or VT, vegetative tassel for short abbreviation, is the last vegetative growth stage before reproduction. Once it shoots its tassel, it's pretty much ready to start its reproductive cycle. Our main indicator of tasseling being soon is this right here, which some people call the spike leaf. I like to call it the flag leaf. It is a rolled up leaf that shoots almost straight out. Most of them unfurl and kind of come out like this, very flat and wide, whereas this one's rolled up. And that is because in here, if I can find it, is the tassel. It's developing, and there it is right there. So we'll see tassels in a lot of our fields within the next week, especially with this nice warm weather. I think that's enough farming for one video though. I'll keep you updated on the storms. Hopefully we miss them all. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day everyone. Peace!